They even developed their own legal system, implementing Sharia in so many European countries.
Citizens are deeply concerned about the EU's failing migration policy. Integration is non-committal and border control barely exists.
One of the key things that you speak about very clearly and lucidly in the European Parliament is radical Islam.
This danger is not only to the Jews, but to all of us. Radical Islam and its terror groups have no borders. The intention of the Muslim Brotherhood is to establish a caliphate on earth.
The radical Muslims do not even need to destroy us because we are done very good at destroying ourselves. There is indeed a vibe shift in the European Parliament. There are topics that were taboo before that we can now discuss in the Parliament. The real attack against European culture, against Western values, is permanent. It's every day facing the infiltration of radical Islam in the schools. Teachers are scared. Samuel Paty has been beheaded because he was teaching critical thinking. If we accept the blackmail of radical Muslims who always scream Islamophobia when you have an opinion, then we stop fighting for our own ideas. I receive also threats every day. Refuse to submit. We need to stop being naive about radical Islam.
My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad 24, and I'm here today with a Belgian member of the European Parliament from the NVA, Assita Kanko.
Hi.
Assita, fantastic to have you here. My first question to you is, have you felt there's something that's referred to as the vibes shift in the last few months that we've seen, maybe in the last year? Is this something that's discussed very often in US circles online? Is this something that you have felt on a personal level in the European Parliament in the last few months?
Well, thank you for having me. I think there is indeed a vibe shift in the European Parliament, but it's just the beginning of a vibe shift. So you cannot feel it very strongly. But there are topics that were taboo before that we can now discuss in the Parliament. There are agenda changes that were impossible before that we can now actually put forward. So I can feel that you can also find a majority for certain points that were taboo before. So I welcome this change.
What are these topics that were taboo? What was the agenda that you would say was impossible to shift forward?
It was very difficult to get an amendment about radical Islam adopted. It was also difficult to put migration debates on the plenary agenda using clear wording. So people wanted always to turn around all kind of topics and find words that meant nothing at the end, or just not put the topics on the agenda. So speaking about migration policy, speaking about border control, speaking about radical Islam is now something that is more possible than before. Is it ideal? Is it perfect? No, but at least we're moving forward.
In the US, we have seen a candidate, Donald Trump, be elected on a platform that included mass deportations. There has been failed migration policy for decades in the EU now, certainly accelerated around the 2015 migrant crisis. Do you think that this is a topic that this feels taboo to say? Can we discuss mass deportations in Europe? Do you think this is something that could appear on an agenda? It's become mainstream in the US, certainly. Do you think that this is something that we could see in Europe ever being discussed?
I think the US and Europe are facing two different realities in terms of migration.
Okay.
Because the migration in the US is coming also from a different area. In Europe, we have two sort of challenges. It's first, we have a common border. We are not a United States of Europe.
Sure.
We have 27 member states with all kinds of different policies. We have a Schengen area that is also an economic area. It's very important for our businesses and for our countries. And then we have a common external border, and we disagree internally on how to protect it. Mm-hmm. So this is a main difference. And also, who is coming to the EU? Geographically, of course, it's another kind of group that is coming to the EU. And then we have a clash between cultures that they bring and the cultures that exist in the European Union that are based on the values of enlightenment. So there is not only issue on how to control the common border, but also how to manage this, to manage illegal migration, and how to open legal pathways, and how to even work to include migrants in the different countries to make sure that they adapt to the values that are actually present in Europe. And that is a big challenge, because when we fail, and we did fail to support proper integration and proper adaptation, proper assimilation, then at the end, our values are challenged, and the common future that we're supposed to build is very difficult to build, because as a migrant myself, my question is, how are we going to turn Europe into something in which we want our children to grow up and have a better future? That is the main question. And it's okay to have ideas about how to do this. And it's okay to discuss it openly instead of having too much taboos around the topic. Yes, we have to control our borders. Yes, we have to be able to have a sustainable migration policy. And yes, people have to assimilate and adapt when they come to a new country. Or there is no point in coming, because in these countries, we want our children to grow up protected by the values that are actually protecting us today and that are threatened.
One of the key things that you speak about very clearly and lucidly in the European Parliament is radical Islam. How large a part of the migrants that have arrived from Muslim-majority countries do you think actually represent a threat of being radical Islamists or of becoming radicalized in Europe? Because we are seeing a trend that is interesting of second and third generation migrants, and we've seen this certainly in France. With many of the attacks, there were a few years of very high level of terrorist jihadi attacks. Many of the perpetrators were actually born in Europe. They were Europeans, right? How large a threat do you actually think radical Islam is? Or is it something where you have one attack from time to time, and actually the vast majority of the people who've arrived from the Middle East are perfectly peaceful Muslims?
Well, there are peaceful Muslims, and there is also political Islam. When does Islam become dangerous for Europe and for people who defend European values and for freedom of speech? It is when it's being put above our laws. It's when we want to implement it as the main rule, and all the other rules have to submit to it. And this is what political Islam is doing. And the attacks, you can see an attack like what happened in Paris in the Bataclan, or what happened in the metro in Brussels or at the airport. You can see these attacks. And of course, it's a peak of radical Islam brutality. But the real attack against European culture, against Western values, is permanent. It's every day in the streets. How women who are not covering themselves are treated. It's every day in the schools, where some families some communities want their religion to be the leading religion in the schools and not the values of the country where they're living. It is also every day in the schools where it's impossible for teachers to do their job. Recently in Brussels, a presentation of a book called Allah Has Nothing to Do in My Classroom was forbidden because young Muslims went to the near the bookstore where it was supposed to be presented and threatened to the library staff, so they couldn't present the book. And I'm organizing a presentation of the book in the European Parliament with the authors, because we cannot start accepting that books are forbidden, books that are telling the truth, because teachers are indeed threatened. Teachers are scared, and some don't even want to continue their work. How can you teach if you cannot say what exists, if you cannot refer to critical thinking, if you cannot actually be strict with children in the classroom without being accused of racist or Islamophobic? You can't even tell them that a girl or a boy. It's very difficult to do a job as a teacher. So this book investigates the loneliness of teachers today facing the infiltration of radical Islam in the schools. And one teacher even says, tell the story of how his wife received a letter, a physical letter, in the mailbox at home, threatening him as a teacher. Can you imagine how traumatizing it can be for a whole family just because you want to do your job? And when we look at the situation in France, where Samuel Paty has been beheaded because he was teaching critical thinking, because he spoke about a cartoon, and you can see what happened to the second teacher, who 1 year ago was also killed, stabbed to death. So being a teacher is a dangerous job because of this. It's a dangerous mission because of this. And politicians who are threatened. I receive also threats every day. Politicians who cannot speak about radical Islam. Why is the conversation impossible? So there is a permanent assault against freedom and against Western values. And from time to time, there is a physical, very visible assault against people in the streets physically, or infrastructure, etc. And now we need to stop being naive about radical Islam.
What are some practical steps that Europeans can take to combat radical Islam? Because obviously it's very difficult to fight against an idea or an ideology. How do you defeat it? What are some steps that we could implement in Europe? What would you like to see as policy change to combat it?
I think, first of all, we need to find our courage back. We need to look in every corner, search for it, find it, and take it again to actually speak up, to defend our values. I think the basic way is to show resilience and to show the power of an idea, the power of the idea of the values of enlightenment. Because this was an idea, and this idea has been, the source of so much freedom. And that's what we need to fight for today, because we are threatened by an idea that this idea we had before is bad, and that is bringing values in, that is threatening equality between women and men, threatening our freedom of speech, and creating all kind of other problems in society. So I think we need to speak up, be able to also refuse to submit. When we have people who are threatened, we need to protect them. We need to say that we stand by their side. But if we actually accept the blackmail of radical Muslims who always scream Islamophobia when you have an opinion, then we stop fighting for our own ideas. We start, choosing what we can say and what we cannot say, and we are doing anything to appease them. And this is how the radical Muslims do not even need to destroy us, because we are then very good at destroying ourselves. So I think what we need to change in attitude, and in our policies, we need to make sure that when you actually threaten what we have established, like our education, etc., that we actually don't accept it and that you feel the consequences. We need also to make sure that we don't pay for people who do not work. Of course, we need to support people who need help temporarily, but we're financing a lot of people who are actually saving a lot of time that they're using to fight us while we are at work. Because when I see all the people in the streets that are demonstrating to call hate Jews or hate Europe, or accuse Europe of all kinds of things while we are in the office working, I wonder, why do they have so much time? It's because we're paying for it.
You would deport these people, Assita?
It depends. People who are born here, how do you bring them elsewhere? But if they commit a crime, then they belong to prison. If they have time to be in the street and get money for free, so I think they're strong enough to go work and pay for their own bills. I don't want to pay for them. I don't think anyone wants to pay for them for free. And for people who want to migrate to Europe, of course, you have chosen Europe. If you choose Europe, then you need to adapt to Europe. You cannot bring your culture with you and impose it to Europe.
You brought up Jew hate. The Jews have a saying that goes that they are the canary in the coal mine. We've seen some pretty shocking scenes from the European Parliament, including a member of Parliament wearing a keffiyeh. There's been a general shift, and an interesting one, where the right, the European right, traditionally associated to anti-Semitism or perceived to have some of their ideas being byproducts of formerly anti-Semitic parties, is now the very pro-Israeli, very pro-Jewish part of European politics. And conversely, the left, tolerant, open, and kind, is now, especially when we look at fractions like the far left in Spain, we look at Mélenchon in France, we see anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in some cases very, very openly in that part of politics. Why do you think this has happened? How do you think we've gone from having left-wing parties traditionally very pro-Jewish, often with many Jewish members of Parliament, Jewish members of the European Parliament, and now having this sort of switch? How did this happen?
Well, it happens again because of the money. They guess, as Margaret Thatcher said, socialism ends when other people's money is finished. And so they still go and get money even when the money is finished from people who work to pay for communities who mainly do not work. And the socialists are very happy that populations, voters who are actually with migrant background don't have jobs and need the socialists to come and help them. So this way they can keep them dependent
as voters
and voting for them, and they want them to remain forever dependent. Socialists hate people like me because I'm not depending on them. I don't need the money. I earn my own money. I work hard and earn my own money. I don't want to be assisted by the socialists or anyone. So they don't like this kind of migrants. They want migrants who are dependent. And this community has been growing because there is a lot of left-wing policy over the years that has created a bigger dependence. And so at the end, this dependence, what does it build? It builds a lack of integration, lack of contribution in society, and what happens to children when they see their parents not working, and they even see generations not working. So they learn that working is even not part of a normal life. They have to do some other stuff. What do people do when they don't work? Voltaire wrote about this. They just have more time to do stupid and bad things. This is what happens. And besides, at the end, the socialists thought, what can we do? And we see it everywhere. We see the trends everywhere, also in Brussels, what can we do to keep these voters? So they go to these voters who are actually using also very bad migration policy. Usually these voters, like from countries like Morocco or Tunisia, they will not marry anyone who is in Europe, and a woman who is in Europe and who is independent, who has her own ideas and opinions, they will go home to get a wife. So there is the import of women from the home country. And these women will not integrate. They will not learn the language. They will not find a job. They will just be there, be dominated, and have many children, and not build a life here. What kind of TV do they watch? They watch the TV that is from their home country. What do they see on this TV? Things that we don't want our children to see here, and that is actually opposing the equality between men and women to other brutal traditions. So they see all this. It becomes a community that is actually parallel to the rest of the community. They even develop their own legal system, implementing Sharia in so many European countries. So how does the left think, okay, we give them money, we need to give them more, so we're going to tell them that the culture is great, we protect them. Anyone who doesn't agree with the Sharia courts, anyone who doesn't agree with the fact that they're using the European social care system to bring brides and make them not work, he's a racist or an Islamophobic, so we're going to protect them. And then the girls will come out there wearing a veil at a very young age, and they will say, yes, it's their culture, we have to respect them. And if you are against that, then you are a bad person. So this is very concrete discrimination against women for the gain of the Socialist Party. So I call it like kind of a win for life, when they kind of see it as a lottery system, that they are going to win a lot of money, and it's the life insurance of the left to keep migrants poor and dependent. And this is what we see everywhere. But this population is sometimes saying, oh, we don't want this life anymore. And then they will start voting center-right, or even go even farther. And then you see the left wing collapsing, because at the end, some people will realize, oh, this is not good for me. Maybe I can be more ambitious. Maybe migrants do not need to be dependent on the left. And some other people will say, oh, we need more money, and there is no money anymore. Policy is changing. Other people's money is finished, as Tatya said, and then they will start voting for someone else.
You've been one of the most vocal pro-Israeli voices in the European Parliament, and you've condemned anti-Semitism repeatedly. Why do you think you're such a lone voice in the European Parliament? Why do you think it is that more members of the European Parliament do not speak up against rising anti-Semitism in Europe?
I think it's not only in the European Parliament. Actually, I've spoken up for the rights of Jewish people to live their life and for the right of Israel to exist. I think there should exist, no world should exist where it is okay to go and find a family and kill them because of who they are. It should never be accepted or acceptable, and there is no excuse for that. So it was normal to condemn October 7 and to defend the right of Jewish people to live a safe life, for the kids to go to schools that do not need to be protected, but that are safe. Why do they need to be behind bars to have some education, while the perpetrators of violence are actually enjoying freedom in the streets and terrorizing other people? So this is not acceptable. However, to discuss these kind of issues and to be vocal about human dignity and the right to self-determination in society is something dangerous to do. People will just make your life difficult. They will accuse you of all kinds of things. They will, threaten you, insult you, and make your life actually too stressful. Besides, some people have already been killed or forced to hide and to be protected every day against the threats of radical Islam. So these are reasons why people don't speak. But I think there is no good reason to keep quiet. When you are in face of injustice, and if you choose silence, it is a choice. If many more of us choose to speak up, nobody will need protection because there will be a majority that is saying, look, we need to protect human dignity, and it's not okay to do what we have seen in Israel with Shani Look on the lorry, with the men speeding on her and shouting Allah Akbar, because it's not going to help anyone that this exists. And we just have to refuse that this can exist. And it can never be called resistance, like people from Mélenchon's party in France are calling, or some of his members of European Parliament who are sitting in the European Parliament, elected, paid by EU taxpayers' money, but actually campaigning against Europe, against European values. And why do some people like this can even sit in the European Parliament? Because of what I said before, they've built a community of dependent people that are actually citizens who only are European on paper, but do not carry Europe in their heart. So what they represent, these politicians, but also their voters, is foreign interests. And these foreign interests are opposed to what is good for Europe.
Do you think that we have reached peak woke? Do you think that the radical left is now on the back foot and they're going to see a return and a swing back to the center? Or do you think that it still has some way to go?
Well, regardless of what I think, I really hope that woke is going to be soon part of the past. I don't know if we reach the peak of woke. Perhaps we can have that impression because we see different election results, and we see that the narrative and the vibe in politics is changing. And at the same time, wokeism is also a very big part of invisible pressure. And that invisible pressure is in the inner circles of people. Like I was discussing it today with people in Washington about how do you experience the limitation of your freedom of speech. It's not only when you go on social media or in the press or in a meeting room or in a conference room. It's also when you sit with friends for a sandwich or discuss with people at the dinner table, and they put tremendous pressure on you, and increasingly people self-censor themselves. And do we even tell each other what we really think?
Do you self-censor yourself, Assita?
Never, ever. I will never self-censor myself, but I will just choose other people to have dinner with.
Fair enough. What is your most controversial opinion?
I think my most controversial opinion is when I tell the left-wing people I'm not black. They don't believe me. I'm just a human being. Can we agree on that? That people are first human beings before having a color, before having other kinds of identities. We are first and for all human beings, and we think with our brains, and we can have an opinion about any topic regardless of the color of our skin. And that is what the left need to think about. It seems to be very controversial to them when I say something like that. Of course, I know that I'm black. I just don't want the left to see me as a black.
Only that.
As a black politician. I am a politician. Like, we don't see men as male politicians. They are politicians. Because it's just preventing you from achieving your full potential in politics. I think what in my upbringing really gave me the passion to fight for justice in politics and for freedom of speech is my own personal experience. As a woman, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, as a mother, as a citizen, I experienced very violently the way in which freedom of speech can be limited when my mentor, who was an investigative journalist in my home country, Burkina Faso, was murdered in 1998 when I was just turning 18. And for me, it really changed something in my life, because when we keep silence, when people are being threatened because they're protecting our freedom, then they get murdered. And when they get murdered, it's also our fault. So I felt that facing this injustice and being silent is a common failure and a common lack of commitment to stand for justice. And he was murdered because of our silence, not because of the cruel aspect of the government that murdered him. So that's what I said. He was also writing in his newspaper that the bad thing is not the bad acts of the very bad people, the bad thing is the silence of good people. So when we are good people, why do we keep silence in the face of injustice? This has been something very strong in my commitment for justice and to never keep silence when I'm faced with injustice. And second, when as a girl, as a child, I have been subject to a lot of discrimination just because I was born as a girl. That's why I'm allergic to people who reduce someone to just one identity aspect, because plenty of things happen to you, like undergoing female genital mutilation, or being as a child, or being asked to serve the boys, or being assigned all the tasks to the chores to do, and the boys can rest and play football. This is not, it's not fair. So I always wanted women and men to be equal, not only in the repartition of responsibility, but also women to have their own money. So I grew up with the idea that to be able to have my own opinions, I needed to have my own money, to be able to decide about my own life, and that I will not be limited to the color of my skin or to my gender. And this is a very strong base, but being only that would have brought me to fight only for myself. The reason why I fight for more than something bigger than myself is a commitment to seeing justice in the world. And this is a commitment that is dear to my heart. I'm more scared of an unjust world, a world full of injustice, than of the threats that I receive. Because that's a very big threat, that we don't do anything to protect the future, that we put our children in the world just before destroying it with our silence. I don't want to be part of that.
I wish you all the very best in your fight, Assita, and hopefully we will restore a slightly more just world than it is today. Thank you for being here.
You know, this in the Torah, there is this sentence, I don't know how to say it now in Hebrew, but justice you shall pursue. That's what all human beings should do.
Thank you, Assita. Much appreciated. Thank you for your time.